But like, I think it'll be interesting to see what this one's going to be called. I feel like safety comes up, you know, like the word, just safety in general, like creating the space to feel safe, to talk about great, like all the security, safety, and visibility. Oh, did I just name it?
Safety, security, and visibility. How to be an anxious adult in a vulnerable world.
Okay. So
welcome back, friends. Another episode of Meet Me at the Cottage. I'm Crystal.
I'm Jen.
Marcus is like the wizard behind the curtain, pulling all the strings for sound and production and all the things that make our podcast what it is. So, and
we upgraded to a fancy
children's stop and go light.
Yes. That lets us know when we are, close to being out of time, and it'll be a little more streamlined. In theory, I think.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like our approach to podcasting, really. We have a loose outline, but we don't really have anything set in stone, and this is a nice physical representation of, just being mindful of time and, keeping things tight, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
Being professional. I mean, we've got these, sound absorbers, and now we have this children's toy of Stop and Go that is, literally red, yellow, and green, so that it doesn't take a lot of brain power to go, oh, yeah, it's about that time.
Yeah, yeah. So, just for point of reference, today is June 24th, our recording day.
2023.
Oh, yeah, 2023. But our podcast usually comes out the following week, so I just like to let folks know like when we're actually recording, especially if there have been things that have happened in the world, which, things are always happening in the world. So
yeah, for sure. Just did we get wind of it or not? Did our news outlets provide it?
Well, and also, did I actually choose to know about it?
Right.
I am a little bit more cautious with what I ingest and allow myself to view, and is that always the right course of action? I like to say I live under a rock. Maybe not always.
I think it's protective.
But it is protective, and
especially given the work that you used to do, whether that originated from that time in your life. Like, I don't want to be bombarded.
It actually did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It actually did start during then, of being able to have some type of control over what I'm being exposed to, and professionally I didn't have any control over that.
Right. Like always, it was always, even though you knew that was your job, that was the nature of your job, it still was like the nature of the job is always being blindsided or surprised or like caught. I don't know, those aren't the right terms I'm thinking of, but just, it's not a planned thing. It's like, this is happening. Surprise, it's this event that you're going to.
Right, exactly, because it's not the norm for everybody to have to see, deal with, go to, any of that, right?
And just for reference, in case this is your first time listening, we're referencing Crystal's prior job as a victim-based police services. No, that's wrong.
A police-based victim advocate.
Those words in
great
a different
job.
Order.
We've both been struggling with our words today, so bear with us.
Yeah. But that type of work, involved, always being sent out to crime scenes.
Going to crime scenes, doing death notifications, providing folks with resources, talking to them, doing all the things to try to help them manage and cope with what usually is the worst day of someone's life, especially if there was a death involved.
Yeah.
And I was, providing notification to the next of kin about that.
Right.
So
for 7 years, you spent your work life, being a part of people's worst days of their life, usually. And it was always, always just a shocking experience, whether it be to you, the professional, even if it was what you saw day to day, it's still like, yeah, that's, and it's the first, for the people that you're dealing with and notifying and talking to, this is the only time, right, that this crazy kind of event is happening, or overwhelming event. And with that, though, the point being is that you controlled what type of notifications and sort of bombardment that our phones will give us about world news, or local news, or whatever, because it's usually it wants you to click on it, so it's something salacious or catastrophic,
right,
or
clickbait.
Traumatizing. Yeah.
And I'm the person that gets her news strictly from headlines.
Yeah.
I don't click and I don't read, so I'm not really well informed.
But you might know, like, generally speaking, oh, that's happening, and I'm not gonna engage with that because it's too much. I also don't get those notifications, and that happened when I, was more actively involved as a therapist, because you are hearing most folks, some hard times and their own tragedy and trauma. And it was the day to day. So I didn't need that extra information. Not that it's to be callous and say we don't care about what's going on in the world. We sure do. And usually when big things happen, people are like, you didn't hear? And I'm like, no.
I'm the one that broke the news to you that Roe v. Wade was overturned. Yep. And I believe, what is it, a year ago today?
Is it a year ago today?
I think so.
Wow.
I'm seeing that, getting my news from headlines and social media, but I believe it was a year ago today, or at least around the year anniversary.
Yeah.
So time has gone by.
So I think this is a celebratory moment, right? Our rights were stolen. Like, yay, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm just circling back to the being in control of notifications and what you consume, or what I consume. I think I told you a couple of weeks ago, I had this aha moment in speaking with my partner, Jane, about, I don't know, it might have been a TV show, right? That had some very gruesome, violent kind of stuff that was happening. And, I am the person who true crime all day, right? Used to be into the true crime, couldn't get enough of it, podcasts, TV shows, books, and then, worked it, basically, professionally speaking, was living real life true crime. And I've noticed that I don't have the capacity or the bandwidth for that stuff all of the time, or as much as I used to, especially when it comes to seeing, violent murder scenes, or, discussion of sexual assaults or what have you. And I never really could quite put my finger on why now it's so troublesome for me when it used to not be. And in talking to Jane, I was like, oh, wait, I get it now. For 7 years, I was exposed to that stuff daily, right? Either I was reading about it, talking about it, visually seeing it,
helping people through it,
right? So doing all of that, some type of exposure. And so I don't want to say became numb, but I was somewhat desensitized to it because it was my norm. It was my day-to-day life. Yeah. And I think that any of us can think about something that you do on the regular, and it doesn't have to be a crime, something that you're a trauma nurse and you see XYZ, or you're a first responder or a therapist or what have you. And it doesn't really register with you as much. So
you just do it, right? Like when we're in the mix of the things, whether we're full on burnout and overwhelmed, or it's just a Tuesday, the desensitization happens. There's some level of it having to happen so you can survive through it. Otherwise, yes. If you were so highly sensitized during every single situation, you'd burn out immediately, and also it would just consume your soul, So you just don't realize when you're in it. You're just like, yeah, I'm just waking up, doing the thing, keep doing the thing, keep doing the thing. And we talked about this too, like not even like a few days. I don't remember what day it was anymore.
What is time, really?
I know, really. I just lost my train of thought.
I don't know what we were talking about, but I'm going to...
realizing like how burnout you were. And then if we hadn't had the discussion about like, I think you're...
Oh, yeah. We just talked about that yesterday.
Okay,
so it was a real long time ago.
You see,
Less than 24 hours ago.
I can't find words, losing train of thought. Don't even know what the day is. It's good.
Yeah. Well, that's symptoms of a brain being overwhelmed. Just, just putting that out there. But yes, I did not know that. But and we'll circle back to that. But this realization of why I'm more affected by seeing these things, I was able to piece together. I am able to these days be more mindful of what I'm consuming and how I consume it. I have control over my exposure to XYZ. And so my nervous system isn't as dysregulated or hypervigilant or in fight, flight, or freeze, fawn. I'm not in that.
Safe.
I'm safe, right? Got other issues that I'm hypervigilant about. But as far as that's concerned, that's why I'm having these sensitivities that I didn't have for, let's say, 7 years. And I'm 2 years away from that job now. And I am more sensitive and I can't consume it. And if I do, it can't be like repetitive or binging. Yeah. I have to take a break from it. And I think part of that is, yes, I'm not exposed to it like I was, but also I am still, recovering from surviving, managing, coping with the grief associated with my mom's death, which, grief is always going to be a part of my life. So I'm still trying to navigate that as well. So I do have some sensitivities, I guess, to certain things, or, can only allow external emotional things that can upset me when I'm able to deal with that. And I understand all of this. The choice that I am saying that I have is a privilege. Not everybody has that privilege of not being exposed to, being mindful of what they consume.
Or even aware. I think we consume entertainment, quote unquote entertainment, so mindlessly sometimes. We just kind of put on Netflix or put on it, and especially with the streaming services, you can just keep watching. There's no commercials, just keep watching and not really thinking about what you are consuming and making the connection of like, oh, my mood has shifted or I feel overwhelmed, and then it's an immediate connection to, yes, what I'm watching on the screen has an impact. And we have to be mindful of that, not only in that type of way, but also in enjoying good content that makes you think or challenges some of your thought processes or just develop really good characters. Before we turn the mics on, we were talking about Ted Lasso because I finally started watching it.
3 years late.
I know. I mean, and Crystal and almost every human I know was like, you gotta watch that show. And I was like, no, because I really don't like show like TV, movies, whatever, that don't comment on something or make some kind of
social commentary,
or even just emotional movement. Doesn't have to be this, but just like something that the content really has depth and it's not just written by some studio or just I don't know, the way that,
well, just to push something out there for entertainment for people to consume, and there's not a lot of thought put into what are we creating,
right? And that perpetuates quite often so many stereotypes that are just gross, but you don't see it, right? So it's not as obvious. Sometimes it's brutally obvious, but other times just woven in by the way that mom responded or that wife or that partner or that child, like these seemingly innocuous things that are
perpetuating these stories that we've been told or indoctrinated to believe. So right. And does everybody have that awareness when they're watching TV that that's what's happening? No. I mean, I can have conversations with people. We watch the same thing and we had vastly different experiences of
what you just saw.
Like, it was real entertainment for you, and I am looking at it through a totally different lens, which makes it unenjoyable. And guess what? That sucks sometimes.
Yes, it
to
does.
not be able to enjoy it.
It does.
But yeah. So anyway, back to Ted Lasso.
Yeah. So just and I don't even know why I originally brought this. We are just nailing it with.
Well, we were talking about the consumption of entertainment and being able or aware to know what you're consuming, how you're consuming it, and just
what's being reinforced, and like it's just about, I think, critical thinking. And I totally understand people may be listening or thinking like, that's why I watch TV, so I don't have to think. Can you shut your faces?
Get it? Me too. That's why I put on the old standbys, the familiars that are funny. I've seen it a million times. I don't have to think. I don't have to anticipate. And I know I'm going to laugh.
Yeah. And I do understand, but I think once our eyes are open, you can't shut them, right? And I remember, this goes back to like college and taking like feminist classes about media. And that's where I was like, oh no. And then I literally could never again look at the ways that particularly women or people who identify as women are presented and represented in media, and many other folks too. But people of color, LGBTQ trans folks. For a long time, I watched a documentary that showed that like trans folks were regularly murdered in TV shows, and again, this perpetuates. And sometimes people are like, "Well, come on, that's just TV. People know the difference." Yes, but there are themes that are perpetuated through our like subconscious, really, that we take in, or if we only ever see that the people who are in charge are men. White men. It's like, do I think that only white men are always in charge? No, but when I'm in a situation where I assume, oh, that guy in this medical field is a doctor, possibly a nurse, possibly any other thing.
Well, let's be honest. Also, in hearing other podcasts and people who are in the entertainment business as well, it comes down to what's palatable, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they're not really going to believe that a trans woman of color is a doctor, so we need to make it insert whatever so that people will watch our show and we can make money. It has nothing to do with what people actually want to see.
Represented,
Representation. That's why it is so important that when media, movies, TV shows are like put out there and representative of basically the people that are in the world, that we consume it, so that we let the numbers, the whatever, know that yes, this is something that we want to see, that you thought wrong.
Right. Well, and that continuously happens with like indie movies that blow up, or Marcus and I were actually talking about the Miles Morales, like Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and then there's going to be another movie in that series as well, and like how outstanding the movie was. It won an Oscar, right? Like if you win an Oscar, it's huge, in that field. Yet them finding merchandise for that character is so difficult. Of course, there's inundation with the traditional Spider-Man, but this movie won an Oscar, has developed a sequel which was just as outstanding as the first one, which is always challenging to do, and is going to have another movie as well. And yet it is still challenging to find very easily that particular Spider-Man suit, or that particular Spider-Man's attire when he's not Spider-Man. Or I just bought Izzy, my son, a new bed set, because you may recall my house burnt down. so we're like replenishing things as we go along. And while I did find it was kind of a pain in the ass. Like where you get inundated with, the red and blue Spider. I know the red and blue Spider-Man's been around forever. I know. I'm just saying, it's just, this movie has, done really well. And it does a great job making commentaries. It's funny. It's smart. pleasing to the eye. It's, all those things. And I don't care about superheroes. I don't have any interest in it. And I genuinely enjoy watching these movies. But my point just being, right, is that it wins Oscars. People love the movie. Teen boys were dressed up like Miles Morales, not the Spider-Man, the guy. Because at the movie theater, these are teen boys. I mean, it was super cool to see how excited they were to be represented. And not just specifically boys of color, although that is super cool and awesome that they're being represented. But, many folks were psyched about it. So it reaches people when they're like, oh, I don't know if it's believable. People love it. People want it. People enjoy it. And yet here we are still finding.
Still need to find a way to convince the manufacturers of things that it's what we want.
Yeah. I remember when that Star Wars came out, and I don't know anything about this either. I just remember that the girl was the hero, and there were no toys of her. And this huge Star Wars movie, people couldn't find toys of the star of the show, of the movie. I think her name was Rey. I don't know. I don't follow this up. But, and then the manufacturers, the toy companies were like, oh no, we were just waiting to stop with your noise and your lies. You just didn't think people would want a girl action figure. And everyone was asking for it, because when not influenced by yucky messages, boys do want to play with girl action figures. Girls want to play with action figures too. It's the rigidity and this binary concept of this society hits us everywhere.
I played with He-Man.
Mm-hmm.
My brother had He-Man. For those of us who were made in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
He-Man.
Remember She-Ra?
I had She-Ra. I had that little doll.
They re-released that on Netflix.
I had a picture of me from when I was a child, holding my She-Ra. It was a Christmas gift. But, I didn't have Ken dolls for my Barbie, so Barbie dated Ken.
Mm-hmm.
Or not Ken, I'm sorry, He-Man.
Right. Exactly. Why wouldn't she?
Yeah, so.
Well, Izzy prefers, we went to the library to grab some books, and he pulled out, he's learning to read, and it was learning to read, and it was a Barbie thing. He's like, yeah, I'm grab that one. And I'm like, cool, dude,
Right, because we as adults genderize everything. So it doesn't have to be boy, girl, what have you. It doesn't matter.
Right, it truly doesn't. And the grips that what would happen if we don't have a boy and a girl toys? I guess people will Google it and find the toys they want anyway.
It's kind of like you buy cats toys and they really just want to play in a box.
Yes.
Lay on your papers.
Yes. Oh yes.
Your hair ties.
Help you on the computer when you're trying to type things.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Yeah, all of the things.
Yeah.
So we were also talking about evolution, not Darwin, but
right.
Personal growth and resistance, internally and external resistance to change, growth, and it's kind of interesting. So I think that yesterday when we were talking, I had mentioned that I saw something on social media to the effect of, the you from 5 years ago would be so proud, keep going, which prompted the conversation, and I had it with Jane too, and then you and I talked about it, of the you from 5 years ago, who was she, and would she have ever thought that right now, the life that you're living or who you are today was even going to happen? I would have laughed in everybody's faces because everything about my life is different. Yeah. Other than the home that I currently live in, and the car that I'm driving.
Right.
Everything else is, as Taylor Swift the lyric is, everything has changed.
Yes.
So,
right.
Some of it for the worse, some of it for the better. Some of the better is because of the worst. So I think that's a great way to segue into this conversation of change, evolution, who we were 5 years ago. So I think we should maybe get in our little time machine and go back to 5 years ago, which was...
And we invite you along, friends.
Welcome to 2018.
Oh, that's when we met.
Yeah. So, Jen and I know it may sound like we've known each other forever, and I'm pretty confident that we were slaying dragons in past lives.
Yes, totally.
Or the patriarchy.
Yeah, blowing the man down. If you haven't seen that movie on Prime, look at it.
So yeah, we met in April of 2018 at a conference, Ending Violence Against Women International Conference, real feel-good stuff in Chicago. So that's where Jen and our friendship started, and it really was just you know this person, you know that person, you just happen to be at this conference too type of stuff. And we didn't hang out during the conference or anything. We ate meals together if we were all in a group, but
it was another person that I reckon I didn't even know Crystal existed. In fact, I really shouldn't have been at that conference because it was for like law enforcement mostly. It felt like
victim service providers. But the funny thing is, I recognized your name because, again, going back in time, Jen and I both used to do medical case management for people living with HIV and AIDS.
Yep.
Separate organizations, but Delaware is a small state.
Yeah.
It's even smaller when it comes to the organizations providing services. So I recognized her name from that, but if we might have met at like a conference or at an event, but didn't really know each other.
Yep, that's right. I totally forgot that. That is so funny. Like there's these parallel kind of existences professionally where we would like orbit, right? But not actually interact.
Right.
But yeah, that was 2018. I remember going to the conference because I actually really enjoy conferences. I really
enjoyed that conference. That's a conference I would want to go to, even though I'm not in the field anymore. Yeah. I really enjoy the Avawi conferences.
Well, I would argue that you are in the field of serving victim and trauma survivors still.
You can't see me, but I'm rolling my eyes at Jen.
I'd like to reframe that for you. No, because you are still in the field, right? And like that conference probably would still continue to enhance the type of work that you do.
Yeah.
Now, which I know we're talking about the time machine, right? Because, where were you 5 years ago? And I think your life has had more of a drastic change in career, right? And just overall, where you were 5 years ago, who you were 5 years ago, what you thought you would be doing.
Who I thought I was.
Right. To current, where there's, I think, a big shift in that. And it continues to shift and grow as, you continue to find yourself professionally, which I think is exciting. I know we're all over the place, but we're in a time machine now. We're back in 2023.
Well, we're still in that time machine because, really the transitions or the shifts that I've made, as I told you yesterday during our conversation, probably wouldn't have happened had I not met you and we went on this journey together of, becoming yoga teachers around the same time, not because of each other and not because either one of us wanted to teach yoga, really.
Yeah, it was really kind of a personal experience, like, to dig deep inside and reflect and grow, like sort of spiritually or like mentally, emotionally, all that stuff. And mind and body connection is so important for like trauma healing and just in general,
Yeah. So, I think we talked about on our first episode, like the evolution of, how we came to be partners and the Healing Cottage came to be, which the Healing Cottage is now 2 years old. Yeah. It opened in June of 2021. So Here we are 2 years later.
It's crazy.
It is crazy when you really sit back and think about time. But, if it wasn't for Jen, who we had a conversation in early 2021 about, I don't know, what I was going through. I was feeling some kind of way because of work, really. And she was like, I think you got like vicarious trauma and some PTSD and compassion fatigue and you're burnt out. And I think you maybe need to take some time. And I was like, who are you? And what are you even talking about? Like, that's not possible. You don't understand.
Yeah.
And that really started the ball rolling of recognizing that, oh, this isn't normal, which we might have talked about before on the podcast or maybe not, but it's kind of, circling back to a little bit at the beginning of this podcast where I was talking about the constant exposure of trauma, violence, what have you, from a professional standpoint, kind of creating a baseline for what you are sensitized or desensitized to as far as, media, TV shows, what have you. So I assumed how I was feeling, what was going on inside of me was just normal, because it really was within the context of my profession and my coworkers. So most of my coworkers were feeling the same way, similar, different varying degrees, whether people admitted it to anybody other than themselves or us in a confidential way, amongst the 2 or 3 of us. It really, I had this aha moment and, had a discussion with my supervisor about how I was feeling. And, I'll save all the details, but it ended with me taking a leave of absence.
Which was historical, actually, for your unit, right?
Yeah, in a sense. Yes, it was.
We're not going to gloss over that. Well, it was a very big deal.
Well, it's also, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And from what I was told, that not just in my unit, I'm not sure how many people within the organization had ever taken a leave of absence for mental health stuff. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It was for mental health reasons.
Of course it was. You said, you've been dealing with this and most of the people in your unit have dealt with this. And it was sort of normal. Yes. Many mental health conditions are normal responses to kind of messed up situations. Not saying all. I'm not giving a blanket statement about mental health or trying to minimize it or make it like it's not significant. It in fact it is, but it is often normal responses to abnormal situations. It is not and when I say normal, I mean like the human body, the human mind is not supposed to be exposed to that level of violence and that level of witnessing trauma and tragedy on a daily basis, and that goes for first responders as well. Although we know that's very taboo to even talk about the mental health, just suck it up and deal with it. And so, you standing up, what's the word? Bravely, right? Even if you're like, that's shut up. I know. You bravely standing up and being like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And I'm asking for leave for no other reason. I'm not going to give you this other kind of reason. It is because of mental health. I am not okay. That was significant because you made it visible. Even if no one ever does take it again, you did it. And making mental health visible is so critical to the conversation, to other people not feeling like they're alone. And not that you went into it for that reason, but you did it. That's what happened.
Yeah, I did. I took 12 weeks and it wasn't a vacation.
No.
It was not easy. It was a whole situation of you would think that you have a doctor and a therapist who are saying, hey, you need a break. But, the way that the systems work, there was no validity to my short-term disability was denied because I could do my activities of daily living. I could brush my teeth. And I was like, okay, right. But do you even understand what my job is? Like, do I need to spell it out for you? Like at this time, I was having interrupted sleep and nightmares. I was having nightmares of people like being murdered in front of me or placing themselves into body bags. No, that's not what I witnessed. Like professionally speaking, it's not as if I watched a murder or any of that stuff. But yes, I did see people in body bags and dead bodies and that kind of stuff. But this stuff was happening to me. And, the people that make these determinations, I don't think they really didn't understand my job. And so I had to appeal my denial a couple of times.
Because she's a fighter.
It fucking sucked, dude. It was so exhausting, and it further exhausted my emotions and my mental well-being.
Which is so gross, right? Because you're applying for mental health reasons for disability, and they make the process so difficult. And that's not true to just Crystal's scenario. As a mental health therapist, I have helped people apply and written notes and written the documentation that they need. And what they make clients go through is these are vulnerable people saying, I'm not okay. I am, quote unquote, disabled because of my mental health. And they're like, typical insurance-y stuff, sort of banking on running you out of it.
My HR person was wonderful and very helpful to me, and it helped me jump through these hoops. My therapist was wonderful. My primary care provider was wonderful. My boss was like super supportive. So
even with all those scenarios,
all of these things, the people that made this decision weren't on board with it. So to make this very long story shorter, after my final denial, which I started this process in April, and I think it was finally resolved in August, I had gone back to my job in the end of June, left that job and started a different job, but was still dealing with this stuff. So my new employer, who was still within the state system, was also having to deal with this too, because it was an ongoing thing. And finally, the person who was my appeals rep for the second appeal, she was just like, I reversed your denial, Crystal. You've been through enough. Like, I was like, oh, thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. It's like, you've been through enough, which is, it meant to be like a nice sentiment. Like, it's been really hard. But yeah, like, imagine the intensity. And mind you, when you're going through this disability process, you are not paid. So not only are you not being paid.
I was paid.
You were paid.
I was paid because fortunately for me, so I had to take my PTO, so my vacation and sick time.
Right.
So 30 days, great. And then after that is when you had to be, you had to apply for short-term disability. Right, and so you were paid a fraction. I don't remember all of the things, but I fortunately had enough time banked where I never was not paid.
Right.
I ate up all of my time.
That's it. So it still costs you, right? Like, you may have been able, thank goodness, to be financially okay in the sense that you had a lot of PTO and whatever, but what short-term disability does is pay you, it's usually a percentage, something like 66%. Sometimes it's more. But they pay you for, a part of your wage so that you can continue to make your bills and that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of fortunateness there that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand all of this was a privilege to be able to get paid, to have support, like,
sure,
professionally speaking, not just my employer, but my mental health provider, my physician, I didn't have to convince anybody. Yeah. Well, kind of not my therapist. When I first asked her about this, she didn't know any of this was going on with me, that I was having these things, because I didn't know. We didn't, when we had when I told her about what was going on, like when I first was taking time, she didn't know any of this because I didn't talk about it, because I thought it was just like normal for me to be experiencing, these things. But
even with all that support, not having to convince, not to have to jump through those hoops, it's still, even with PTO, it was still a grueling process. Again, your mental health already, you're stating loudly, these professionals are stating loudly, her mental health is not okay. And the insurance companies are like, yeah, here's another hoop and another hoop and another hoop, all for, at the end of the day, for them to be like, yeah, you've been through enough. We're going to go ahead, because you essentially fought enough. And I know this is true because of what I have witnessed with other people who aren't paid or don't have PTO or whatever. And they're sitting there being like, I can't make my bills.
I have to go back to work.
And if you return back to work during a disability claim, it eradicates the disability claim. I believe that's true. I believe that's my experience. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just saying, I've witnessed these things happen, and then I witnessed it happen with a friend, Crystal, and it is truly inhumane, and even if you're physically disabled, it's still not okay. Like, you're not okay, period. And the insurance companies put a lot on the victim.
Well, that
or the survivor of whatever
mental
they're
health
with.
stuff isn't visible, so you can't see like, oh, I broke my leg, so I can't do my job. But if I was out on FMLA for, let's say, a broken leg and I couldn't perform my duties, they're not denying a claim because you can go out to dinner with your family.
Right.
But mine was denied because
Right.
I could do my activities of daily living. And, if my therapist wrote a very, very long, like, detailed explanation. Mm-hmm. She had me talk through, what is a day like you for your job? Mm-hmm. What is it like if you have to do a death notification or you go to an accident? Please walk me through the steps that you do. And she was like, wait, what? You do all of that? I was like, yeah, there's a lot to this. So it's not like I'm just sitting in an office, what have you, which, right, no shade to anybody.
Right, no shade to
but
that, right.
You don't fully understand the job that I do because it's not
well known or well understood.
It's not well known. Mm-hmm. That is true. Like, there are many states in the country that don't have police-based victim services or, even larger jurisdictions. So all of that to say that, that started this transition for me. And, meanwhile, while I was on that leave of absence, my mom had kidney cancer. She had this tumor on her kidney for several years that was being monitored for growth. It was in a place on her kidney where it couldn't be biopsied. And so we just had to monitor it, and it started to grow, and she had to have it removed. Like, that was one of the options. And I had to take her to Fox Chase. She had one of her kidneys removed while I was on my leave of absence. So, was worried my mom was going to die because the doctor, that was one of the possibilities. Yeah. And I appreciated her not sugarcoating it. My mom was a cardiac patient. She's like, I'm great at my job, but I can't, control what your mom's the cardiac part of it. My mom survived that, but that was also the stress of being the caretaker for that. Is my mom gonna die? Yeah. Little did I know, 3 months later my mom was gonna die from something completely different. Right. But 2021 really sucked.
Yeah, it did.
It sucked.
It was worse than 2020.
Yeah, 2020 was the jumping off point. 2021 really sucked, but that's where a lot of my transitions happened. Mm-hmm. I left one job to go to another job, to leave that job because my mom died, to focus on teaching yoga full time whilst trying to navigate grief, which brings me to this whole new platform or area that I really want to work on and change the narrative because of my own experiences, and continuing to do the help people thing, which I believe that was my soul's purpose. That's why I was put on earth, to help people. And so me 5 years ago would have never dreamed any of the things that I'm currently doing would have been something I would have laughed in people's faces. Yeah,
for sure. In 2018, for sure. I'd be like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to have a holistic healing space. You're going to be a yoga teacher. You're going to focus your main kind of passion on grief and changing the narrative. That's what you're going to do.
I wouldn't even figure that this time last year.
Yeah, well, that's true too, right? That's also part of, I think, this evolution that we're talking about. And I think a lot of times, people are like, oh, I wasted all this time learning this or going to school for that, and now I end up doing this, and it's not even related. Or, I'm not saying you're specifically saying this, but like,
I definitely don't feel that way at all. Because it's all like interconnected. I think all of my background helps to shape the type of yoga instructor I am, the way I approach grief, the way I approach pretty much any human that I come in contact with, even if we're just friends or strangers. Or strangers.
Yeah. But that's just it, right? It's like I always like love to, throw shade at the culture and society. It's my favorite, like this fucking society. That's what they say, right? Like, you went to school for this and you do this now? That's not even related. Like, what? But really, this is the journey of life. And what an amazing opportunity we have to
grow
and let ourselves explore life and not just say, well, I did go to school to do this, so I guess for the rest of my life, that's what I'm going to do. It's like, they're all stepping stones, right? So like, I became a mental health therapist. That's all I ever wanted to do. And that was a journey. And then after doing that for a while, I was like, okay, I think I want to just do the yoga thing for myself. Okay. Yeah. And then throughout, personal experience going through like birth trauma and stuff. And I was like, I think I want to be a doula too. And I'll integrate. And I never really actually, there was maybe one birth that we can say that I attended as a doula, but never really did doula stuff. Okay.
All right. And
So
we're
4, 3, 2, 1.
back on the air.
I did the yoga teacher training and then was like, yeah, I'm not gonna ever teach. And then started to kind of do some teaching, open to holistic healing space together, and then never really taught. And then became a doula only to attend like one birth of someone I knew, and then never really did the doula thing. And then eventually started this nonprofit that another colleague and I are working on, that is about maternal mental health and well-being and all that kind of stuff. But, looking at that, even in my own narrative, sometimes I'm like, oh, good job, Jen. Like, you went and did this yoga thing and did nothing with it. And you went and did this doula thing and did nothing with it. But the real truth is that I wouldn't have gotten to any of those stages and places. And then where I am right now today, without stepping on all those stones, right?
Well,
And it's not wasted time.
No, it's awakening or uncovering this other layer of ourself, which is something that we also learn about in yoga, the different layers of being. But kind of something just occurred to me in me talking about, like, some of the worst things that have happened to me have led to some of the best things being a part of my life. And I would say maybe that's true for you too, with the birth trauma.
Yeah.
And making yourself aware of that and reading, seeing, being exposed to, knowing other people have had this. There's not, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a mother by choice, but I think there's not a larger conversation that happens around birth trauma. But there are people who are shaking things up and bringing it into the streamline. But from that experience for you has come these other things that are helping to help other people, right? Like, from my mom's death taught me about grief, and I want to support other people. Your birth trauma made you aware of the birth trauma, and how many other women that you know personally that have experienced it. I would say probably most women, and often they're not aware of it. I didn't even know what birth trauma was until I met Jen.
Well, I didn't have language for it when it happened, right? So like,
it's just what happens,
right? And I've had clients who tell me their story about their birth and describe something pretty terrible and scary, right? And they go, so I guess I think it was okay. I think it was good. And I'm like, well, that doesn't match, because what we're taught is, well, at least that baby's okay. Of course, we're glad the baby's okay, you jerks. We're just the show. You think we're just a vessel, but like the way we're treated and the pervasiveness of obstetric violence and institutional racism and obstetric racism and all that stuff that is a societal issue that just shows up in the medical field, when many of us, and generationally, people are taught to revere medical folks, right? They know everything. They're as close to God as possible. In fact,
don't question. I mean,
don't question the authority. They know. They went to medical school, but they're especially seen. There's this pedestal, that I think that I would say, maybe our parents' generation.
Well, my mom's definitely. I went to many of her doctor's appointments, and my mom was, and probably still is in the afterlife, her little ball of light soul in the afterlife is still being sassy. But she was a sassy person who had some strong opinions and was very stubborn and bullheaded. But when it came to doctors or not being happy with stuff, my mom didn't always speak up for herself. So I went to appointments and I advocated for her. And when the doctors would talk to me instead of her, I'm like, hey, she's right there. This is happening to her. Right. I'm just saying the things and writing the stuff down.
And even just you saying that it's if you really let yourself think about it, it's bizarre to think you need to bring an advocate into a room in a place that's supposed to help you, because you know you're up against really it's hierarchy, patriarchy, you know, the idea of like, I know best and I will tell you and don't question me and that's especially, well, I think it's true across many medical, you know, fields.
My mom, I didn't go with her because she felt like she needed me to be there for that, but I was the note taker, right? She couldn't remember. Same thing. Of course, you're not going to remember all the stuff, right? You're overwhelmed with what is actually happening. Mm-hmm. So I took the notes. I even have a notepad that I still write in. That I still, when I flip through it, I have notes from like doctor's appointments that I went to with my mom. But,
and that part, of course, with memory issues and that's super important, right? Like to have that advocate there. I think in the experience of the birth world and understanding, like, I'm going to some folks bring a doula in, myself included, the second time, because I was like, I'm arming up. I'm arming up.
You need somebody who's going to advocate for you when you're just not in the space to be able to
you're in this really
put the strength there.
Yep, and you're in this vulnerable place. So again, I do feel it's bizarre and really twisted that we feel we have to do that to protect ourselves in a space that's supposed to be about helping and, you know, support, and something's wrong and I will take care of you, that we have to arm up and get ready to fight for our own rights, particularly in birth, because birth is not a medical event. Like for most reasons that people are in a hospital is because something medically is occurring. Birth is not, but we've commodified it and made it such. There's a place for that in birth. I'm not saying that there aren't scenarios, and many birthers can talk about, I was so grateful to be in a hospital, saved my life, saved my baby's life. Yep, no doubt. It's just the way, of course, in which we do it as a society, and it's about commodifying it first. And it's a very, very lucrative industry.
Yeah.
So like it's just a little compelling to note that, right? And I think that's what we're really doing is, with the age of, you know, the internet being a thing and being able to look up stuff for ourselves. No, we do not know more than doctors. We do understand they're trained, highly trained people. There's no taking that away. It's just, you're not God. You're not to be unchallenged. It's that the medical experience should be more collaborative, because while I'm not a doctor and I haven't gone through many, many years of training, I do live in this body.
Yeah.
And I do know things about my body, and that's not tracking. And I could be wrong, sure, but why can't it be collaborative instead of what feels like, it is patriarchal and like parental, but abusively parental, where it's like, do what I say and don't ask questions, and I said so, and how dare you challenge me. And that ego for sure shows up regularly in the medical world, regardless of whether you're in birth or just general practice or whatever, is how dare you. And that is a training issue. It feels like if they all come out with that mentality out of medical school, that feels like a training issue. And so, you know, that's, why we're commenting on that now. But just the point being that, yes, sometimes through tragedy and trauma, we can find things that we would have never dealt with before, or known. I would have never known what obstetric violence even is. And I say it as much as possible so that if people never heard it, I can explain it. And that term I know about because of the birth monopoly. So they're at the birth monopoly, or at birth monopoly.
I think it's at birth monopoly, but we will put that in our posting for this episode, as you know, we try to be cognizant of who we reference and what we reference, so that we can give them credit and highlight their platform, so that other people can also become aware of what they're doing.
Yeah. So. But in you know, going, I think down the road we're trying to go down today. It's very interesting.
I mean, as always, it's a real bumpy road. So thanks for strapping in and being with us.
Ride along. Hey, it's not boring. It just is confusing. No, but I think when we always say that, and then we listen back to it, and we're like, no, I think I followed that.
Marcus does a really great job of making it cohesive.
Yeah. But with that, the tragedy of losing your mother and changing careers and doing all this upheaval of life, really, in many, many ways, personally, professionally, coming to realizing how important grief is and how much you have to offer in that realm. Crystal had her first grief healing circle
last Friday.
Yep. Don't know
the
what
16th.
Mm-hmm. And she had a really great turnout. Many folks were unknown to her. So a lot of times, we meet people, or regular people, keep coming back to classes or things that Crystal does. But the majority of folks in that room did not know Crystal. This was just, an ad that we created and a post, and folks were very drawn to, grief healing, because I think we talked about this last time, not a lot of space in our society for grief. Hurry up and get over it. We don't want to see it. And Crystal is, compelled to change the narrative, because it is so important to create that space. And again, be visible with what is often invisible or stuffed in a closet. And I would say, unapologetically, just like wearing it like out and proud. Because by being visible, not unlike you taking your leave of absence and being visible for your mental health, being visible in the grief world and saying, no, we're not going to shut up, be quiet, get over it, get back to work, not bother you with our sadness or, whatever. We're not going to do that, because it's not healthy. And all the research shows that connection is what helps folks through grief, and that you live with it, you don't get over it. And that the things that people say that are meant to be helpful often are out of their own discomfort and lack of an understanding of even how to do grief, because it's not represented. And Crystal creating space for that is so critical, that so much so that, these folks come out of the woodworks quite easily when we're talking about grief, to be like, what, a space where I'm allowed to be sad and no one's going to judge me, or I can talk about, whatever. And I was a participant, and so was Marcus in Crystal's group. And from a participant's perspective, I thought it was a great opportunity to just sit with other folks in varying different levels and stages of grief. Not stages, but different places in their grief. And Crystal did a great job facilitating it. And I think it's just solidified even more so that there's a shift coming for you that is more about, almost exclusively focusing on grief. And Crystal's always done yoga in a healing way. And I've always felt like, God, it's so hard to explain what Crystal does with yoga. Like, it's not traditional yoga. It's not just yoga. There's so much more. And then we were just chatting, and she's like, it's yoga for healing. And I was like, yes, after all this time, there's the language, right? That these sessions are really specific, and that is what they do. People end up leaving feeling a shift. And we can feel it after a yoga class too, but this is different than a traditional yoga
I've
class.
had people say it feels like therapy.
Yeah. And I've always said, as you know, I'm like, it's yoga therapy. And you're like, we can't call it that because, I know. The gatekeepers took the language and was like, no, you can't have it. And you have to go through this training to be able to call yourself that.
But we can call it therapeutic yoga.
We can. It is therapeutic yoga. But, and I think it really, it pairs nicely with the grief part as well, because moving your body, getting those, trapped trauma and
emotions. And it's just another way of, it's another modality of healing and releasing type of stuff. And thank you for saying what you did about the healing circle, because I said yesterday that I was feeling like I didn't do a great job, which is really just my norm with most things that I do, and especially new stuff. But I really felt great about being able to have that space. And it's kind of like, if you come to my yoga classes, whether you're at the cottage, at a class at University of Delaware, I'm also teaching in other community spaces. I give out these little quote cards called Thoughtfuls Pop-Ups, which was something when I went to my very first yoga retreat in 2018. The facilitator, Becky, a real magical little bright light of a human being, gave them out to all of us as we were leaving. And it had such an impact on me that when Jen and I, you know, started teaching yoga and stuff together, I'm like, I'm going to buy these and I'm going to give them to everybody. And it's something where I'm like, people are probably going to laugh. It's like everybody looks forward to it. Adults, the students at University of Delaware. So all of that to say, you know, things that I did within this grief circle, I thought like maybe people wouldn't be into or resistant. And the big thing was providing an emotions or feelings wheel.
Yeah.
And it is astounding the depth of our emotions and feelings when we have like 5 that are our comfort zone. But if you peel back the layers, there are different layers to all of that. So we did a feelings exercise, you know, like check in with yourself. How are you feeling at the beginning of this? How are you feeling at the end? Like, could you do this maybe every day by looking at this wheel and really checking in with how you're feeling and giving having language?
That's what I literally was just gonna say. You know, most folks are like happy, sad, scared, right? Like they know the general, or they can say I'm pissed off, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm irritated, or whatever. But the feelings wheel that you used, and maybe we can reference it.
And it was it was referenced in one of the weeks of my grief educator certification. One week the lecture and the labs and stuff were on feelings. So that was the feelings wheel that David Kessler provided to us. And so I adopted that and utilized it in our healing circle. And there are different variations of them. My therapist also gave me one, you know, in therapy a couple of years ago for an exercise that I did. So,
Marcus is a part of Marvin Tolliver's Black Men's Group, and I think another cohort he's gonna have soon, or if not, it's already started. But he provided a feelings wheel as well that looked very similar, and that was actually a significant part of Marcus's journey, and his own kind of self-awareness came from that feelings wheel. So it really is so valuable, and giving the language once again, right? Like people don't know, they don't understand, and once they can feel like, oh, I think one of the participants said, oh, I didn't realize. It might have been Marcus.
I also said too, like whatever the word was, like fearful or anxious was a layer of, I don't know, sad or angry. I don't remember. But I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's so helpful because we want to understand ourselves, you know, because there's no place to do this, right? And we're doing it silently or isolation and lonely and, you know, all the things that it's like, oh, look at this tool that you were like, meh, people might not be into it. That was like, it was like you gave gold, like, here you go, right? And
yeah,
it's
people
like,
are like, oh, wow, I really like this.
Right. And it's a great way. Some of us have better emotional awareness than others, but it's a great way to be like, okay, yes, this is what I'm feeling. I am feeling irritated. Oh, irritated. If I back it up, oh, it's a level of anger. Oh, right. Okay. Or I think it was Marcus who he had withdrawn, I think is what he said he felt. Hope you're okay sharing this.
Marcus, my twin, always.
And he didn't realize withdrawn was a part of anger. And he is very in tune with the fact that he feels still has a lot of anger. No, I shouldn't say still. As a part of his healing, and he has a lot of anger about the fire. And so the withdrawn part of it was an element of anger. And he was like, oh, that makes sense, right? So like, this is just so helpful, no matter how savvy you are in emotional intelligence or emotional awareness or not, to take a moment, create space to say, how am I feeling? What word would I use? And what does that track back to? And it just is empowering to have
those
that
continual whys. You know, it's like, well, why do you feel that way?
Right.
Well, why do you feel?
Right.
So it's just peeling back the layers that you may not always want to do, and I don't always want to do it, but no surprise, Jenn doesn't force me, but she challenges me.
Encourage.
Challenges me to do some self-reflection or to verbally process, you know, out loud stuff. But
well, because I think you and Marcus are both internal processors, And I'm a verbal processor, and it doesn't have to be exclusively one or the other. It's just ways to like figure stuff out. I'll literally figure stuff out as I'm talking and be like, oh my God, I just figured it out. So sometimes I could in fact just be talking to air, and I talk out loud a lot to myself. I talk to my voicemails. I talk to out loud a lot. And the internal processors do that too internally. But I think that the part that gets lost sometimes is to then share that or put it on the table or let it out for some tossing
to be witnessed
around.
Perhaps, I guess.
To
be witnessed.
Yes, to be witnessed. And the value that comes with that last piece. So if you want to do it internally, that's cool. I internally process sometimes too, but I find that the reaching out for folks to kind of toss stuff around just allows for further understanding, and then we can go back and do it internally,
or being able to have things reflected back that you as the person who it's happening to, or the things that you're feeling, aren't always aware of or can't see because you're
too close.
You're in the house, you're in the room,
Yeah.
and somebody on the outside might be able to see a little different. And I guess I also say someone who knows you well enough, to know you and how you operate, and can lovingly, caringly say these things without being a dick about it.
Well, and I think that we talked a little bit about this earlier about like, if a relationship is sturdy enough, right, or strong enough, you can have
hard conversation.
And not even if it is, you can have hard conversations, and the relationship might dictate how that goes. But the hard conversations are like, hey, I'm noticing this about you. And while it might feel attacking or threatening, or, it's coming from love, or it's coming from, it's not serving you, or this is what I'm observing, or this is what I'm witnessing. And sometimes it's on behalf of, you're like, hey, that's really messed up that this happened, and this person's doing this or treating you this way, or not following through on something they said they would. And it's helpful for the other person to be like, yeah, like that's how I feel, but I feel like I shouldn't feel that way. Like, yes, my witnessing of that is like, yeah, you really, this is not fair. This it feels unjust, or it feels
dismissive.
Yeah, dismissive, or just, whatever. And to be able to do that in a relationship, it's tough. Our own stuff shows up, and sometimes we do get into a place of like, why would you say that to me? Why would you talk to me like that? And then if we let ourselves remember, this person is not likely trying to get me. This person is not likely trying to cause harm. Although we have had friendships where people are passive aggressive, or people are not okay with themselves, so they're lashing out or projecting onto
hurt people.
Right, hurt people do hurt people, and that is true. And then also we do our work, and then we don't continue that process. But I do want to say, like, when you said just being witnessed or sharing stuff with people out loud, sometimes when you're too close to it, you can't see, or you're observed by this other person. And that's what I got to experience in my grief, with talking to you and, thinking I'm pretty savvy, or I know what's going on. It doesn't matter how savvy you think you are. It's just so helpful to have other people witness you, reflect, feedback, and share. And I think, when you were able to do that, and I just didn't know what was going on, and I didn't have the awareness to say, Crystal, I don't know what's going on. Help me understand myself. We often don't. We're just talking. I think that was true when you were going through your stuff, and I was like, I don't think she knows she's in vicarious trauma and PTSD from work. And you're just talking, and you just don't realize it. And so when someone's like, hey, I don't know if you know this, and you just don't have the awareness to say, I need you to help me figure this part of out. I don't know. I'm just kind of spinning my wheels. And you were able to tell me things and share with me things and just say a few seemingly, minor things to you, but were major to me, that I was like, okay, yeah, all right. Cause I feel like this, or I don't know why I feel that. And you were really able to put things into perspective just by existing, just by talking to me, and making it feel so validating, which, I am going to now segue into a plug for your individual grief healing sessions, because that is what that was. No, it's not therapy. And in fact, I think there's a lot of value in it not being therapy. It's a very specified approach to connecting and witnessing.
It's a peer-to-peer.
It's peer-to-peer, right? Which arguably should be therapy and the medical model and all the things, but we're not going to, go there. But it is peer-to-peer. And it also, because of who you are, Crystal, and all of your experience in tragedy, trauma, victim services, serving folks living with chronic illness, and the grief that sometimes comes with that, especially a stigmatized chronic illness, your own loss, like all of who you, Crystal, are, make those healing grief, those one-on-one grief healing sessions unique and special and highly trained, in what you do. And so while I was just talking to you like a friend, it was very much a one-on-one grief healing session, and there's just a lot of value in that. And so as we talk about transitioning and what you're doing and finding your footing and changing the narrative of grief, the Grief Healing Circle is certainly one of them. Creating a series on grief is another that you're tossing around.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Creating a series, and
the one-on-one sessions, which I find, I think that to have a whole nother value. So you can sit in a group setting, also very valuable. And then you can have these one-on-one sessions as well.
And, when we put out the, boosted a post or created an ad for the Grief Healing Circle, I had many people from out of state who were interested, but couldn't attend. So that really gave me some food for thought. So I do plan on creating some kind of virtual group or series. And the great thing about this grief educator certification is it's not a license in the sense where if you live in Nebraska, I have to be I can work with anyone anywhere in the world.
Right.
So that's great. It really opens the door
really
for, being able to reach a broader spectrum of people.
And being visible again. Here you are in your pocket of the world, creating the visibility. I do grief. That I've done this training. I've literally lived it. I've been in the professional world of it. It's visibility again. It's visibility, and
just too that maybe it doesn't have to be reiterated, but this isn't a solution. It's not going to solve problems. Yeah. The goal is not to solve problems, or because grief is not a problem to be solved.
It's actually quite a normal human.
Right. It's a human response to love or tragedy, right?
Yep.
And so it's not a solution. Much like therapy also isn't a solution. You have to be an active participant in therapy and be a participant in this healing, grief healing. And there are so many different modalities of being able to manage and carry your grief, because it doesn't go away. Your life just kind of grows around it, and it's always going to be a part of you. Because if you're mourning the loss of somebody, then they're going to be dead
for the rest of your life.
For the rest of this life, right? So that's how long your grief is gonna last. And
just
maybe
saying that is huge.
Yeah, and understanding that grief really is because of love, right? And
no one's running around being like, stop loving in front of my face. But the flip side of love, when that is lost, is grief. Even in breakups, right? There's a tremendous amount of grief that comes with breakups, whether you're the actual person who broke up with, the breaker-upper, they have grief too, and the person who's broken up with, yet it's sort of trivialized, breakups. Maybe divorces are more legitimized, but this idea of oh my God, you broke up with your boyfriend, you broke up with your girlfriend, you broke up with your partner, come on, get over it.
Yeah, it's kind of didn't you want that? Or if your sibling dies and people are well, I thought, did you even have a relationship with them? Or your parent, even in estrangement, it's still somebody that you are attached to. And if I may just circle back to our healing circle, Jenn and Marcus were involved, and they were the only two people who were specifically there for something other than a death.
Yeah.
Right? And which is great, because it is a death of sorts, right? It's a death of the life that you had, this home that you had. You almost died. So all of that. But, within the circle, I did have an exercise where, if you're a person who's lost a person, right? It's asking, if somebody asks me about memories of my mom, I love that because I want to talk about her, and that's a way for her to stay alive.
Yeah.
And so I did go around. I'm like, if anybody would like to share a favorite memory or something about their loved one, please do so, or your house. And Jenn did speak up, which I told her this yesterday and we talked. I love the fact that you spoke up and said these things about your house, like your favorite parts of this house and what you're kind of missing from that. And if you want to talk about that now, I think it's just a different way of like seeing grief through not just the lens of a death.
Yes, and then once again, here you are, like you said, changing the narrative of grief doesn't just mean like saying like we can do it out loud and proud, but also that grief is not just death, right? It often is like a symbolic death. It's this loss and what, or loss of like what could have been, or loss of what actually was, or not a human being. I mean, we were so fortunate because it's an interesting circumstance because we faced our own death, right? And our pets, right? Somebody could have died for real, in that type of grief loss type of mentality, but no one did die, and we're fortunate about that. And sometimes I do feel like, I mean, no one died. Like, what's my problem? Like it's just a house. It's just, so that judgment that I impose upon myself, that I have fear that other people look at me being like,
it is just a house, but let's talk about, like you spoke in the grief circle.
Yeah.
Like, so what is just that house, right? Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, so, both Marcus and I have always been on the same page. It's nice to be on the same page about this and other things, but that we always wanted to be the open house, right? The house where people felt they could come, they could be safe emotionally, that they could be
physically safe,
that they could have fun and just be kids,
welcomed,
make a mess in the house, like, even though I have to challenge myself there, but like make a mess and just be kids where you can be kids. Because, and I'll speak for myself, and this isn't true for Marcus, but for myself, that's not how it was for me growing up, right? Like I didn't feel like my house was open. It felt very closed. It was always physically closed, but also emotionally closed. And I grew up in domestic violence, and and just that's not a welcoming space for outsiders to come in. And so I never wanted to have my friends come over because I never knew what was going to happen on the other side of the door. I never knew when I opened the door what was going to be there. We grew up in a working class home. And definitely, I would say, whatever's after paycheck to paycheck, like it was worse than that,
Samesies.
Yeah. And like, and so our house was, it was just truly not enough space for what our family needed. It didn't have a basement. My dad worked overnights, and he was woken up constantly by us being kids. And then also because of domestic violence, because of his own lack of awareness of, all the things. It was not it was a scary thing. It was violent. It was scary. And if violence wasn't occurring, it was impending, right? So you're just holding your breath. And my mom, like as a domestic violence survivor, best she could is, and both my parents really did the best they could with the tools that they had for their own trauma and tragedy growing up. But violence is, not forgivable and are not acceptable, I should say. And my mom has her own issues for sure, and she still survived, but did the best she could with, what she had. So the space just never felt like I could take a breath, right? Or feel safe, or bring friends over, or feel consistent that what was on the other side of the door was just love and bright. And even if it was messy, like it never mattered, So, very long story short, the house that we lived in was Marcus and I, we were like, this was the We Made It house, right?
The physical representation of all that you didn't have.
Right, all that we didn't have. And it's not even about the size of it by any means. It's what it represented. Before Marcus and I had kids, we lived in Wilmington. We had like barbecues every other weekend. We had a level of entertaining, folks, and having people come and celebrate and just be alive.
Being your chosen family?
Yeah, definitely chosen family, and just live and be alive in our house, And we moved from Wilmington, and we moved to Middleton, whatever. And then this house, also about 5 years ago is when we moved in. It was August of 2018, I think. Yeah, I think that sounds right. That like it was the We Made It house. We felt pride about it. Like, we worked hard for it. It felt like, roomy, and it had, like, we were able to paint it the colors we wanted and give it the TLC it needed when we bought it. And it was big for, like, it had open space for entertaining, indoor and outdoor. It had all these things. And Marcus was in the throes of completing the basement all by himself, because he was
doing such a great job.
He was. It was literally almost done. So sad. He's that dude who watches YouTube videos and, like, he's like, yep, I understand it, and, like, does it right and thoroughly. And it's
I am not a twin with him on that part.
Yeah. And I love every second of that for him. But he was literally almost done, and he was creating that space for him. And we just felt like joy in that house, and we felt pride in that house. And I always knew when I opened the door, like, what was going to be on the other side. And neighborhood kids came and played, and it was the life. And we would entertain, and we'd have birthday parties, and we would just love for people to come over and enjoy it, and feel open and safe, and kids could run and play. And it wasn't like, oh, don't touch that. It's like, this is like a birthday party. It's going to be a wreck. Like, we already know. But we just want people to find that joy. So with that, that the structure itself, yeah, that's sad. It's what the life that was in it that we desperately wanted and were proud of, and felt like we made it, we arrived, so that loss is really what feels sad. So the life of the house, it felt like a place that was alive, that, really in almost every way the opposite of how I grew up. My house was dark, and there was so much sunlight, and
it really is interesting as we're just sitting here talking about it, like, as we're verbally processing out loud, just the comparisons of it, right? Like, you had a sunroom. It was always very, very bright in your house, like, metaphorically and literally.
Right. Hopefully, so,
Well, yeah, and it, as a person who went to the house, it was always full of life, and sometimes for me it was a little bit too much with kids, running amok and doing the things that kids do. Yeah. I have a sensitive nervous system, and sometimes I needed a little break.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do too. And I live with these kids.
And, it was, speaking of safety, I felt safe enough to say, I need to go for a walk. Yeah. Like, I need to get away from all of this right now, because I'm like a deer in headlights. Yeah. It is so much for me.
It is.
But on the other side of that, how refreshing to see not just your children, but neighborhood children, the kids' friends, or, friends' kids, or what have you, or just living their best lives, right? Which I didn't grow up with the childhood of, like, living my best life either. I grew up very poor, and that's another podcast episode. But, it wasn't like that for me either. So to see these kids, like, running around with not really, maybe outside of that house, right? They had worries and concerns, but in that moment, like, it was their home. It was no, if I want chicken nuggets, I'm going to ask. I mean, you even had a specific type of nugget for one of the kids' friends, right? Because he ate there so often. So it was an extension of their own home. Yeah. And that's really refreshing to be able to see that. And as an outsider, knowing about Jenn's childhood and what she wanted for her own children, her and Marcus, to be able to see that, I think I told you more than once, it's like, it's really nice to be able to see that, and that your children are having this childhood experience that you didn't have, right?
It's so opposite. Now, surely, I am damaging my kids in other ways. So yeah,
you're just a human, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, it is truly the opposite, where my kids wouldn't even understand not
having to be quiet, don't break this,
right? Or
don't touch,
just not let someone come over. They'd be like, this child came in over, with me, and that there would be no hesitation. Like, of course they did.
And even saying that, I mean, her daughter Felicity is a very empathic, tuned in 10-year-old child who I love having conversations with her, because she'll talk about her past lives, and it's just the norm. And I'm like, yeah, man, tell me more about that. Tell me about, she makes up stories, and I'm here for it. But having her tell me, talking about, a a friend's house and how she just got bad vibes, right? I didn't feel safe, so I didn't go inside. Like, it just, something told me not to go inside, that she's that tuned in, whether it's her intuition, definitely, but also having the comparison of like what my home feels like and the energy that the house has, my environment has, the way I feel compared to this other space of knowing that they're not the same. Like, I don't think a lot of adults have that awareness. No. She also hasn't override it. Right. She hasn't learned to or been, well, you and Marcus actively teach your children, especially Felicity, because she's a little older and more aware, to like listen to your intuition and you honor that and always talk about it. Like, okay, why are you feeling that way? And, you know, I dove deeper with her. I'm like, well, why do you feel that way? Like, if you're having this bad energy, like, what is it that you're feeling? What is it that you're experiencing? Right. Didn't say, oh, well, you're ridiculous.
Right, exactly. Or get over it. Just go
right.
in.
I'm like, wow, that was really great of you to be able to trust your gut and to know that, like, you need it to just stay outside. Like,
because it's all too often, whether you're children or adults, you're just told, suck it up, or like, oh my God, what have they actually done? You can't prove it. That really burns me up. It's like, well, there's no evidence that they did anything bad, so why do you feel that way? Because my intuition says so, and I'm pretty sure we're built with that, like, for a reason. So like, I don't need to wait for the evidence that they're gonna kill me. I'm just gonna go ahead and listen to that intuition that says, and I'm being dramatic, but you know that, like, that I'm gonna steer clear, because that everything in my body is like, bad news. It doesn't matter why, right? In that circumstance, right? It's like, I'm getting bad vibes, and I'm not going to just override it because you haven't yet proven to me why. All my instincts are saying stay away, right? But, you know, and that's you know, that's
another thing. But it just speaks to the safety, and the I don't want to say permission, but permission that she and Izzy also have of exploring, not just their environment, but exploring like their feelings, having awareness about it, their intuition. I mean, Izzy is also a very tuned in little dude, and he and I also have some things in common of being scared and nervous to do new things, but then having fun. So I'm like, same, Izzy. Like, I get it. It is scary to be around new people and do new things, and then you end up having a really great time. It's just that initial like, kind of stuff.
Honoring that, right? And again, if we do this more for people in general, whether children or otherwise, it's like, that does suck, instead of being like, oh my, what? Just, it's gonna be fun. Like, what's your problem?
Right. He's told me before. I think we were testing out our microphones for our open mic night that we had, and he was like the little tester when Marcus was testing the sound, and he's like, I get nervous around new people. I was like, yeah, man, me too.
And I just love that he has the language for it. You know what I mean? Like, because he's more of a behavioral, we all have, you know, elements of behavioral when something's going on emotionally, we act in a way, but he's almost exclusively shows me what's going on behaviorally, and I'm not as in tune or intuitive with him and that's definitely where I struggle as a parent. Izzy definitely teaches me all the things, begrudgingly sometimes, that I need to know about myself. And I think I was just talking to a friend about him, and as I continue to learn him and just want to be the best parent I can for him, is that he and I are a lot alike in some ways, except they're the ways that I feel ashamed sometimes of like who I am, or like that I have these certain feelings. I don't feel like it's a shaming for him, but I just noticed. I was like, oh, but
he's reflecting back to you the things that you have the most difficulty with in yourself, and you're having to confront them.
And I kind of want to like beat out of myself, but that's not the answer or the way.
So in a way, helping Izzy through that is also helping little Jenn.
It sure is, isn't it? It's
really
so
have
true.
Gone on
we
a
have
ride,
gone on a ride
all about how the loss of your house brought us here.
Right. And I think it's always funny when we think about titling episodes and whatever. And right now I'm like, I have no, what will we even call this? Like, but I think it'll come to us.
Rest assured, you and Marcus will come up with something wonderful.
Well, I think at the end we have debrief a little bit about it, and we, talk about, but I think, and you also have input there. It's not just me and Marcus, but like, I think, it'll be interesting to see what this one's going to be called. I feel like safety comes up, like the word, just safety in general, like creating the space to feel safe, to talk about great, like all the security, safety, and visibility. Oh, did I just name it?
Safety, security, and visibility. How to be an anxious adult in a vulnerable world.
Do you see this, people? Live and in person. If that's the name of this episode.
Oh, is it? I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I just
said it jokingly.
But see, this is how we come up with this stuff. We just sort of like off the cuff. We're like, well, what about that? You know, and then it ends up working in. I mean, that was a solid synopsis.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah, as always, it's really been a journey.
It always is.
So I guess we'll start to wrap up. So I guess, some things that we kind of want to plug.
Yeah.
If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, we do have a newsletter that goes out monthly.
It's great. It's a great way to grab some information quickly and palatably. And
we don't spam your inbox. They're very short and to the point.
They're visibly pleasing.
Yeah. So if you're interested in being added to our newsletter, you can send me an email to Crystal, CRYSTAL at balancedmindjourney.com. You can find me on social media at Yoga with Crystal 0925. You can send a DM there. You can send something to the Healing Cottage's social.
You can write a letter.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, man. And we can add you to that. I will be offering more grief services. My next grief healing circle will be held on Friday, July 21st, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Healing Cottage.
You can register online very simply.
Yep, we can register online. I will be starting a series that it's still in development. I have some ideas that I think are pretty cool. I do want to open it up to virtual stuff. And, as far as the grief services, I really want to make it known that although I am a founder of the Healing Cottage and I primarily do provide services here, this stuff is available for whoever. So if you're a community partner, agency, anybody in the community, a family member who wants, or whoever, right? You want to bring these services or have a group or something in your establishment for your employees, for whomever. I'm here for it. Like, I really want to bring this to the community, however that looks.
Yes.
So it's not exclusively at the Healing Cottage. It's not for the Healing Cottage. I am a part of the Healing Cottage, but my services are available for wherever.
Well, and I think, you're the mobile Healing Cottage as well. Like, you're Yoga with Crystal 100%, but also what embodies everything that it is what the Healing Cottage is about is who you are.
Right. Yeah. So doing that, and I think I want to create a healing circle of sorts in Kent County, Delaware. So, that's where I reside primarily, down in that area, and we don't have as many services for everything.
Yeah.
But I think I want to do a grief, some kind of thing in nature. So at a local park that won't be a state park where you have to pay an entrance fee, but, gathering there and using the healing properties of nature to also explore our grief. So
I love it.
When is that happening?
Soon.
Don't know, but be on the lookout for that. I'm putting a bolo out. Be on the lookout.
Yeah. Is that what that?
Bolo means be on the lookout.
Look at that, everybody.
Yeah. So.
Learned stuff.
So yeah, I think that's, I guess.
Oh, and one last little piece. We are, I think, pretty actively now going to be looking for a yoga instructor for the cottage. Does that seem like that's true?
Yes, that is true. We're going to be putting out stuff on social media, just looking to add somebody to our team. If that's something you might be interested in, you can, again, send me an email,
or
send a letter.
Anybody, a friend. And we do want to emphasize that, like every provider in the Healing Cottage, it's extremely important to us that the person embodies what the Healing Cottage is about, which is, inclusivity and
social justice oriented
and equity, and understanding that this is a part of healing. It's not a part that we remove from our identity as the Healing Cottage. So I'm not saying you have to run around with like signs, in your yoga classes or anything like that. It's just us understanding that when we affiliate with someone or someone affiliates with us, we can confidently say that this person understands that. So if folks come through the doors who feel like it's a safe space. We don't want that
right.
to be.
People already say, I feel safe here. I feel comfortable. So it's very important to us that if somebody sees that there's somebody new offering something, that they feel safe enough to know, like Crystal and Jenn wouldn't have these people
Right.
offering services here or being a part of the Healing Cottage
Right.
if they also didn't embody these things that
Right.
are important to
or that
us.
they literally represent those things, right? So like representation is extremely important to us on the multitude of levels of what we do in life professionally, and that that's extremely important to us in looking for providers, that they represent the community that they're serving,
Right.
Not only with the core values, but sometimes it's who they are specifically. So we're excited about turning this page of the chapter of the Healing Cottage on our, I guess, like 2-year anniversary, kind of
like the podcast. We don't really know what it's going to be. It'll be whatever it ends up being.
Well, really, it's just if the right person walks through the door, right? We're not like hustling to find somebody, and because we have to fill a void. Like that's never what we're about. It's more about like we'd love to have a yoga instructor who is gonna, be able to provide classes on a routine basis that people can come through the doors and get their services and feel good and safe and supported in this environment. And if you're that yoga instructor, like come talk to us. If your friend is that yoga instructor, or your cousin or your mom, your dad, or I don't even know, whoever,
grandma,
I don't know,
grandpa,
pop, I don't, whoever, right? Like tell them, send them our way. We'd love to just meet new folks who are in the healing world and also embody the same philosophies, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that's a wrap on June's podcast episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging in with us. As we always say, it's been 12 hours, and you can always increase your speed of, put us on 2 speed. So we're like talking like chipmunks. That might be fun. As always, we're open to feedback. If you have questions, concerns, what have you,
ideas,
thoughts. Like we're open, we're here for it. I do, before we sign off, I know we always do this, but we do have a community library within the Healing Cottage, and it's free. You can borrow books. We're of a certain age where we had to go to a library and check a book out, and so we also have the little old school cards in the back of our books with the little pockets, and you can borrow them. Unlike a library, we don't have like a time frame that you have to return it. We would like if you return it, and if you don't, well, I guess
that's what it's meant to be.
Right. So we have a variety of books from different authors. We have children's book, but I did just add some books for grief into our library. So It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine, which is the first grief book that I read, and it really changed my world. And also Grief is Love by Marissa Renee Lee. I created a post today about adding that to our library, but I will link that into the post as well that we do for the podcast. You can check out their pages, their offerings, their books,
their podcasts. I think Megan has.
Megan has a podcast. I'm not sure if Marissa does, but we can, see about that. So I guess that's the end, folks. Thanks for hanging in with us, and happy Pride.
Yes, happy Pride. Yeah.
For all of June.
All of it. And actually, every day.
All the days.
Every day.
All the days. But specifically
June.
In June. Yeah. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. And then outro music. Dun, 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 dun.
in my head, all I have are like lyrics and songs from Hamilton playing in my head.
Yep.
So I also have been listening to the soundtrack recently
okay.
again. So I got it just playing on loop in my head.
Oh yeah, we were talking about music before we came in here, right? So who was the girl that you're like, we need to, or the person?
It's somebody that Jane saw on TikTok. Her name is what? Delilah Bond.
Is that it? And then listening to just like Amazon Music, which I'm like, yeah, I know, it's corporate devils. But there was a song by this woman, Paris Paloma, called Labor, and she's, I believe she's British, so she spells labor with a U, Labour. It just really, as I was like singing along and really realizing what she was saying, I was like, oh my God, this song is so good. And it is about just the experience of, I think, particularly women in relationships, especially heterosexual relationships, that where there's like weaponized incompetence and this exploitation of servitude, and how much labor we are expected to do in relationships while the partner doesn't feel as though they should. I really enjoyed it, so
yeah,
check that out.
Yeah,
and check out
Delilah Bond. She's, I think, from the UK, so I think there's a TikTok going around with her song, okay. Dead Men Don't Rape. So,
which is an accurate statement. Just saying.
It's a very stop rape culture type of theme within her music. The couple of songs that I've listened to or read the lyrics, so you know,
love that.
It's got a punk vibe to it. Very rageful. So if you're feeling like you need to channel some of that, if you're a person that likes to listen to rageful music during whatever, I like to sometimes hear that when I run. It jazzes me up. So I was just talking to Jenn, and she was saying that it's like another way to like release energy in your nervous system is kind of like listen to like loud music, and yes,
kind of
which is interesting because when I'm not running, my nervous system can't handle it.
I don't like it. It's too loud.
It's too loud. Yeah. It does something to my ears. Yeah. I just feel like kind of not cringy, like ugh, but like just crackly. Like it's the energy of it isn't for my running space. Yeah.
Yep. I agree. Where I'm like, whoa, why is it so? I like to listen to like sad piano music. That's like, I was like, I really do have a pattern here where like a lot of the music I like really love.
It's melancholic, and that's okay.
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, it is.
There's a book written by Susan Cain, I think it's called Bittersweet, where she also talks about melancholic music.
That's interesting. It's because I like love it. It's like just piano, and like usually it's like a semi-popular music person, you know, singing, and I'm like,
well, it's soothing, really, right? It's the frequency. It's similar to like binaural beats, right? It's the frequency in which it probably engages your cells, and
it like moves, you know. It's like it hits all the like emotional. It lets my sadness out, I think, which I don't like, you know. I don't like to be all visibly sad. I'd rather just be rageful like a normal person. Just kidding.
We never did put our come back from our time machine of
we did not.
Oh well.
But you know, we are live and in person, so we are back. But you know what, that's okay. Maybe this is how our conversations go, where we're like, remember the thing, and then we are like, oh, I never finished that. Did that make sense?
It sure didn't, but maybe it will when Marcus like makes it make sense, I guess.
Or I think, you know, when we listen to it back, it actually does make sense. Now, is that because we knew what we already said, basically, and then we're listening to it and being like, yes.
Sometimes I remember what I say, sometimes I don't, because I kind of just black out.
Me too. I leave it here. When we're driving home, Marcus is like, well, what'd you think? I'm like, I don't know. That's over. Chapter closed. I can't. It's like, it's this pretend thing that I do. It goes out into the ether, and when people listen to it, I'm like, what? What are you doing out there? Which, of course, we want them to, but it's also like, I can't think about that consciously. Otherwise, I'll get all tripped up on my words and not say certain things, like, or just be more awkward, you know. So I'm just like, it's over. We just did it and we're done. Now we'll wait to hear it with some fun, funky music that you put behind it.